Alrighty, welcome to Entrepreneur School. Oh, I'll wait for our guests to connect to the audio before I introduce everything. Oh my gosh, I didn't even pull up your bio. You're gonna have to introduce yourself in a second.
No problem. I can do that.
That's fine. Welcome to Entrepreneur School. I'm really excited about this session today. And we're going to talk about what it is in just a second. But first, I want to take an opportunity to share about what Entrepreneur School is, because beyond these events that we have regularly, we are a community of entrepreneurs and emerging entrepreneurs who are starting businesses and trying to figure out all the things in the land of overwhelm that is running a business, because it is so much more than just doing the thing that you wanted your business to do. Because we have marketing, we have growing teams, we have productivity, we have all of the topics that we're talking about today throughout this series. And one of the most important things, quite honestly, that I think is overlooked and often not connected at all to running a business is health and wellness. So I'm really excited to have you here, Melissa, to talk to us about that, because I shared in an email yesterday that I sent out inviting people to this event that there was a time when I couldn't even wrap my head around the connection between like my physical body and feeling healthy and well, and that was actually like a productive and money-making thing to do because they seem so disconnected, right? So
Exactly. And, the sign behind me says health is, it isn't everything, but without it, everything else is nothing. I like to also share that it's our greatest asset, and to lump it in with our other big assets, our home and our car. And we look after our car, we take it in for oil changes, we put the right gas in it, we're not filling it up with sludge in order to ensure that it keeps running, regular services, etc. And our home, well, we clean, we vacuum, we take out the garbage, we fix things when they're broken, we renovate when needed. But are we doing this for our own body? Very often we're not. And yet we can buy a new car, we can buy a new house. Cannot buy a new body, and cannot build a business from our sickbed.
Absolutely. And, I've experienced personal loss myself. If you don't know my story, I lost my mom to cancer. That was actually the starting point for me to have a business. But when you actually see that, as soon as somebody loses their health, the first thing they say is that they wish that they had that back.
Exactly.
It just doesn't seem to be a priority until it's gone or at risk or whatnot. So let's talk about this. Like, give yourself a little introduction, because you have lots of certifications and like legitimate backing up of why you're here talking about this today. So tell everyone who you are, what you do, and then we'll just jump right into the conversation.
I will do that. But before I do that, I just want to piggyback on what you've just said. And it's actually the Dalai Lama who said, man can have 100 dreams until he doesn't have his health. And then he has but one.
That's it. That's the thing I was thinking of. Yes.
Exactly. So who am I? My name is Melissa Deely. I am the owner of Your Guided Health Journey. I'm an integrative health, mind-body health practitioner, also trained in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnotherapy. So that's a whole bunch of big words that probably means nothing to anyone. So I actually love to say that I'm a baggage removalist and toxin slayer. That's way more fun. And what I do in my role is I help create freedom from the chaos of life and life stressors. And let's face it, life can be chaotic and life is stressful. So I'm the catalyst to guiding you through the most toxic parts of your life. We live in a toxic world. So I help you discover your toxic load, remove the toxins from your body, but not just addressing the physical body, also addressing the mental and the emotional body. So toxic behaviors, toxic food, toxic relationships, toxic thinking, so that you can get back and to living your best life and achieving the dreams you want, because all of this toxicity is holding you back and weighing you down. So I also help you get to the root cause of your health issue. through the use of functional medicine labs that get mailed to your home. So very easy to do them and send them back to the lab. And then we see where the imbalances are in your body. So I'm not a doctor. I don't diagnose. I don't cure. What I do is we see where the imbalances are, what the deficiencies are, what the toxicities are, so we know how to correct that. And when we correct it, the body comes back into balance and it will heal itself because that's what it's designed to do. So toxins can be impacting our hormones as well. And that is, of course, part of our conversation today. Are your hormones driving you crazy? But I also just want to share that your health is a journey. There is no magic pill. I hate to bust that for you. It takes time. And initially, it's becoming aware of the problem and getting into that awareness state. And very often, people just kind of stop at knowing they have a problem, and then they don't go any further. But the awareness state is where we realize, I need new skills, I need help, I need guidance in order to resolve this issue. And where we're needing to fill the gap and we're reaching out to other people who can support us. And then we fill that gap, we learn the skills, we learn what we need to be doing, and then we're implementing that into our life. So that's practicing those skills. And as we do that, that becomes habit. We're managing our life better. We have solution, and we've now resolved that issue. As with many things in our life, as we go through life, one health issue can be resolved, and there may be another health issue that crops up. So I don't consider your health journey to ever finish, but what we can be doing is always choosing to be as proactive as possible so that we're able to address things quickly, because we haven't got that far out of balance, right? The further out of balance we are, the longer it takes to help heal the body. But the great news is for most people, we can be rebalancing the body in a period of only 4 to 6 months. And that's not very long, given how long it might have taken you to get to where you're at today. Nobody goes to bed 100% healthy and wakes up the next day and gets diagnosed with a chronic illness. That chronic illness has been brewing inside our body for months, years even in some cases. And we may have had symptoms, but society teaches us to suck it up, ignore the symptoms, push through. We start to write them off as signs of aging, allergies, genetics, and do nothing. And I want to invite you to stop ignoring your symptoms, because your symptoms are your body's way of talking to you and asking you to do something differently. And when we create awareness around those symptoms, we become aware of the problem sooner and we can address it sooner. So for those of you here, I would love to invite you to turn off all other distractions. If you can turn on your video, I'd love to see your beautiful faces so it can be more interactive, and have pen and paper handy because I'm going to share a lot of information with you today. And I also invite you to ask questions as we go through. So as I talk about symptoms, I would love for you to type in the chat, do you experience any symptoms of hormonal imbalances, such as PMS, night sweats, hot flashes, mood swings? I'll keep going through the list. You don't have to type what it is. You can just type yes or no. Anxiety, irritability, overwhelm, tender or fibrocystic breasts, weight gain in the hip area, brain fog, vaginal dryness, sleep issues, low libido, abnormal cycles, hair loss, memory issues, poor recall. So those are kind of the really top signs of hormonal imbalance. It doesn't mean it's only hormonal imbalance. We can have brain fog, memory issues for other reasons, but just pop that in the chat, and I'm opening in the chat there. I got a yes from Kelly. So chances are we've all experienced some of these things. Yes, from Corey. So here's something else where I feel like our society has failed us women today, and we need to get better at this, in that we're very good at teaching our young children about puberty in schools, but we don't have a place to educate women about going through menopause. And so as such, the way we learn about menopause is very often talking to our friends, talking to our mothers, our sisters, etc. And when you hear their symptoms and then you experience it, you think, oh, this is normal because I experienced, this must be what menopause is. But the reality is that all of these symptoms are telling you that your hormones are out of balance and you can do something about it. You don't have to accept these symptoms as our right to being a woman, and we have to tolerate, accept, suffer through them as we go through menopause. So that's really empowering, just to know that you can rebalance your hormones and alleviate those symptoms, because our bodies are made so beautifully. We were not designed to suffer. It's just society that has kind of taught us that that's the rite of passage of a woman, right? But we really, truly were not designed to suffer. And here's the thing, perimenopause to menopause can last 8 to 10 years. Do you want to suffer for 8 to 10 years of your life? No. And that those 8 to 10 years of our life are very powerful years of our life. When, we're coming into our wisdom, we're really growing as individuals. There's often life changes going on there, and we deserve to be living it at our very best and not suffering through. PMS on the other end, with younger women, even kids in high school, again, it's accepted as totally normal. You can walk through any high school hallway and hear girls talking about PMS, right? I know women, I've worked with women who have told me, my PMS was so bad I was afraid to go to work because I didn't want to talk to anybody because I thought that I might bite their head off. And that wasn't justified. So it was easier to stay home and not talk to anyone for those 2 days every month, right? So it's impacting your life when it's at that point. And all we had to do was run a lab, see where their hormones were, and rebalance them. So this is a little bit of, it's a big part of my experience too. I struggled from the age of 18 with migraines that I would get at the onset of my cycle every month. And it was just 1 or 2 days. And so I lived with it. I went to a homeopathic doctor who actually gave me some homeopathic treatment to help me cope with the pain of the migraine. But I lived with it, thinking, this is what it is to be a woman, right? As I got a little bit older, there was a time when all of a sudden, instead of just getting it for 1 or 2 days, I got these migraines for 5 days in a row. And they were really debilitating. I was at work, trying to meet deadlines. My head was pounding. Really, I just wanted to go home, lie in a dark room, turn off all stimulation, and wish someone would chop off my head. So I went to the doctor to say, why are they suddenly worse? Something inside me was telling me to ask why, because I felt if I knew why, I could then change whatever it was that I needed to change so that I didn't get these daily migraines anymore. And my doctor had nothing for me other than a stronger dose of a medication to get rid of it. By now I'm in Canada. The homeopathic medicine was no longer available. It's prescription drugs at this point. And I didn't want a stronger prescription drug. I wanted to understand why. So I gave up on that. I found a naturopath and went and saw her. At the end of our intake session, she said to me, "Why don't we test your hormones?" And I went, yes. I didn't know that was possible, but that's exactly what I'm looking for, because in testing my hormones, we'll see where they might be out of balance and what we can do. And I learned that my progesterone levels were very low relative to my estrogen levels. And that's a common trigger of migraines. And so then we knew, that could be the problem. Let's address that and see what happens. So she gave me this absolutely disgustingly vile tincture that I had to take for 1 teaspoon of it for 2 weeks of each cycle for 2 months. And I did, because I wanted to get rid of these migraines, right? And after just that first month, I noticed that my migraines were much better, definitely receding. Even my normal 2-day migraine before my cycle was so much less intense. So I did it for the second month, and my migraines went away. And I see your comment there, Kelly, that I feel like all tinctures are vile. Yes, but it's amazing what we can do when we want to heal and when we notice improvement, right? And the beautiful thing about our body is when we create the environment for it to heal, it will start healing very quickly. So I had no migraines for 7 years. Amazing, right? And then they came back. Well, our hormones are always changing because our hormones are impacted by all sorts of other things. I've mentioned toxins. Stress is another factor, right? There's all of these things in our body that impact our hormones. So they're always changing. So 7 years later, they came back. And so I went back to the naturopath and said, I need more of that disgusting stuff. And she said, well, maybe we need to run the lab test again. And I said, you know what? They're exactly what they were before. I don't think I need to run the lab test again. I think my progesterone is low relative to my estrogen. Let's do this again. If it doesn't work, I'll come back. It worked. So that lasted another however many years. And then I hit perimenopause. And now I had migraines, but they were different. And so this time I went back and said, can we run that lab again? Because the migraine is different this time. And this time I found out my estrogen was low, my progesterone was low, my testosterone was low, and the naturopath was looking at me going, I'm not sure how you're still standing right now. But again, we knew exactly where the imbalances were in my body so that we could address it. And that was really powerful because I was able to address it quickly. And so I'm, through menopause now, but my experience of going through menopause was very easy with very few symptoms because I was able to address it early and I didn't have to suffer. And that's what I want for others. And so, I pay it forward. I educate on this. I share the fact that this is available to people because I didn't know. We don't know what we don't know, right? Until we need to know. And if we just go to our doctor, doctors aren't promoting this. And if they do test your hormones, they're using blood. Whereas testing hormones through saliva is actually a far more effective test for hormones. And we get those tests on the holistic side of health. And interestingly enough, that very same lab I ran the first time with the naturopath, I now run myself for my clients. And I still run it on a regular basis just to make sure, because even coming through menopause, our hormones are still changing and we can still have menopausal symptoms for 2 to 3 years after. And I'm still in that phase, right, of making sure my hormones stay balanced because I don't want migraines. So what is, the experience for you? Ask yourself, are you in that PMS mode? Are you in perimenopause? Are you through menopause? Do you know where your hormones are at? And do you know how they're impacting your life? There you go, Corey. See, you had no idea that testing through saliva was the most effective. And if, as Kelly said, if anybody has questions along the way, feel free to type them in the chat or come off mic and ask them, because I'm absolutely happy to answer them and make this as interactive as possible. So what I'd love to dive into now is how different aspects of our lives are impacting hormones. So I'm going to start with talking about toxins, and I'm going to share my screen, which is all set up here. Thank you, Kelly. And there we go. So let's talk about our liver, and let's talk about how it's getting bogged down just based on everyday life in our world today. So our liver is charged with cleansing our blood every 6 minutes, and also 500 different chemical reactions in the body that are helping keep our body clean and trying to get those toxins out. In our world today, though, our poor livers are getting bogged down so that they can't do everything. So we know that alcohol impacts the liver. So does excessive workload, smoking, prescription and over-the-counter medicines, because it has to break all of those down. And very often there's chemicals in those that our natural body isn't used to having to deal with. Infection and illness is impacting the health of our liver. Stress, psychological and emotional, as well as the physical stress on the body. Processed foods are negatively impacting our liver. Environmental toxins, heavy metals and pesticides. And I just want to point out that since World War II, we've had 144,000 man-made chemicals introduced into our world that are getting into our body through our waterways, our food, the airways. We're putting them on our skin through personal care products. What's also impacting our liver are allergies and food intolerances, and we may not be aware of those. And every time we're putting them in our mouth in terms of the food intolerances and sensitivities, it's a trigger that we're not necessarily aware of. Poor nutrition and poor eating habits, eating on the run, eating in a stress state, etc., is impacting our liver's ability to do its job, as are coffee and energy drinks. And we are a coffee addicted society. And how many people are then having an energy drink in the afternoon to get through our day? So as you can tell, we're really bogging down our livers, but we may not be aware that we are. Now, I skipped one there, and that was deficient soil systems, which we also have ever since the advent of the agricultural revolution. And it's been take from the soil to produce as much as we can to feed the world, but we're not allowing those soils to settle and rejuvenate so that the nutrients are in the soil. And if they're not in the soil, then they're not grown into the food, and then they're not in the food that we're eating. So as an example, if I were to go back to like the 1940s and pick an orange and compare that to the oranges we get today, we would need to eat 9 oranges today to get the same nutrient content from that one orange in the 1940s. Nobody eats 9 oranges in one sitting. You can't, because that's too much fiber. You would fill up too fast, but that's just oranges. The same can be said about spinach and, all the other food that's grown in our nutrient deplete soils. And how that impacts our liver as well is that our liver detoxes in 2 phases, and both phases are really important. Phase 2 is where it converts the toxins to being water soluble so we can excrete them through our breath, through our skin, through our urine, and through our bowels. And if the body can't convert them to being water soluble, it's very smart. It doesn't want these toxins in our bloodstream. So it stores them in our fat closets. Where are our biggest fat closets? Well, our brain is largely made up of fat and water. In women, our breasts are full of fatty tissue, right? And then if we have additional weight, then we've got more fat closets that our liver is storing our toxins in. So our fat is toxic when it can't get the toxins out of our body. And if we're not getting those nutrients in through our food, the body can't get them out. And the key nutrients needed for that phase 2 conversion are not in our soils today. So I like to say that our liver is overburdened and undernourished. So we need to be supporting our liver more. And one other thing that I'm going to share too, as I talked about our breasts being fatty tissue, that our breasts are also very close to our lymph nodes. One of our biggest lymph node areas is under our upper left arm for getting the toxins into our lymph nodes and being drained out of the body. When we are wearing tight bras, underwire bras, it's actually trapping the toxins into our breasts and not allowing them to move through and into our lymphatic tissue. And so my recommendation to people is we stop wearing bras as much as possible. So, and at least
ditch the officially a feminist talk. Just kidding.
And I don't even think of myself as a feminist. I'm an educator, but as much as possible, get rid of the underwire bras, right? I have like a little tank top on today. I will, in all winter long, when I'm, even on Zoom and I'm wearing sweaters and things, I'm not wearing bras. Nobody knows. They can't tell. I don't care. And often we're told, we have to wear bras so our boobs don't sag, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the thing is, again, the human body is such a miracle. When we don't wear bras, we're using the muscles in our chest, et cetera. And it isn't about saggy breasts. It's about, using what nature gave us. And some of the messages we get are purely marketing messages to sell bras, right? So just think about that. Do you want your toxins stored in your breasts? No, because look at all the breast cancer we have in the world today too, right? So I'm going to share another slide with you here as well. which is all about the toxins that are in so many of our personal care products. And the average woman is actually putting over 200 toxins on her skin every morning before going out the door to work, just getting ready, from shampoos and conditioners to face washes to moisturizers to makeup, etc., etc. Each of these ingredients has multiple toxins in them. And when we put it directly on our skin, does anybody want to type in the chat how quickly they think that goes into our bloodstream? Any guesses there? And yes, Corey, we all know now my secret is out that I don't wear a bra at least all through the winter, and I'm fine with that. Society needs to, again, adapt and recognize that it's okay to see women's nipples. We can see men's nipples. Why can't we see women's nipples? It's fine. Any guesses on how long it takes for toxins to get into your bloodstream when you put it straight onto your skin?
I feel like you're going to say really fast.
I am going to say really fast. So Corey's saying just a few minutes, and it is even faster than that. It is 26 seconds. And when we do that, it is literally going straight into our bloodstream, and it is not giving the liver a chance to detox it. So we need to be aware of this. And we can, once we know things, it's what do we then do, right? We have this information. What can we do about it? There's so many companies now that are making really clean products that we can be using instead. And I'm not somebody that says you have to throw everything out and start over. That can be expensive. But as you finish up things, start switching out those things for clean alternatives now that you know what's happening, because we don't want those toxins in our bloodstream, because then they really are traveling throughout our entire body, right? So I actually have on my website, yourguidedhealthjourney.com, a resources page. And then when you click on resources, it goes to my recommendations. And under the My Recommendations page, I list all sorts of clean options for personal care products, just lifestyle, laundry, cleaning in your house, et cetera, et cetera. So check that out if you're looking for options to cleaner products, because I have a number of companies that are listed there if you're looking for help in that area. So that's what's happening with our toxins. Now, how does that impact our hormones? Well, our liver is also charged with detoxing our excess estrogen. Okay, so if our liver is bogged down and it can't do its job properly, it can't detox our excess estrogen. And this becomes a problem because it can put us into an estrogen dominant state. Now, we are also getting estrogen through food, and it can be healthy foods as well. And we're getting estrogen called xenoestrogens through products that we're using. It's in plastics, it's in a lot of those personal care products, etc. And so that makes the body think that our estrogen is higher. Plus, we're getting it in through our food. And as I said, healthy foods like, soy, plant-based foods, flax seeds, et cetera, there's nuts and things can have estrogen in them. And so it's just something to be aware of, that really what we need to be doing is ensuring that our body can detox what is deemed to be excess estrogen. And the reason for that is being in a estrogen dominant state has a domino effect on our health. So what happens in our estrogen dominant state over time is that it can start to slow our thyroid, and that slows our metabolism. That can cause weight gain. And 1 in 8 women today are having thyroid issues. It can also put us on the path to type 2 diabetes, which nobody wants. We tend to think of it as being a chronic illness related to people who are overweight, but it doesn't always have to be if it's being driven by an estrogen dominant state. An estrogen dominant state can put us on the path to breast cancer, which again, nobody wants that either, but it is a known cause for breast cancer. And so these are all kind of, triggers that will domino effect in our health resulting from being in this estrogen dominant state. Does that make sense to everyone that's here on the call? Because I think that's really important information for people to understand. Perfect. So another way that we end up in an estrogen dominant state, you'll love the bamboo sheets, Kelly. They are the softest sheets ever, no toxins. We're sleeping for 8 hours a night, hopefully, and we'll talk about sleep a bit later. You want to be lying on, sheets that aren't toxic, because remember, if you're in toxic sheets on a toxic mattress that's covered in flame retardant, 26 seconds into your bloodstream, right? Yeah, we just don't want to do that. And I've had my bamboo sheets now for more than 5 years. I just looked that up recently because I was buying some for my daughter, and they still look brand new. How many times have they been washed? Whereas I've never had sheets last that well before. They normally start to have, those little cotton, the little fluff balls on them. And then they start to get really thin where the feet are from rubbing or whatever and get holes in them. Whereas these still look brand new. So it's the best investment you can make. But coming back to another reason we can get into the estrogen dominant state, that is stress. So we've talked about how toxins can impact our hormones. Now I want to talk about how stress can impact our hormones, because we live in a stressed out world. And in fact, we were more stressed out than ever before pre the pandemic. And then the pandemic just added a whole nother level of stress, right? And we're all impacted by it. And we look around and we see other people stressed out. And again, we normalize it and think it's okay. And we don't have any idea what it's doing to our health. And so I'm going to dive into that. But in regards to specifically to hormones, what is happening when we are in that stress state, when our sympathetic nervous system or fight or flight is turned on? Our brain is trying to set us up so that we can get to safety, right? And it is therefore pumping adrenaline and cortisol into our body to give us the energy so that we can fight or flee or freeze and think clearly, right? But in order for our brain to be able to give us that additional energy, it has to shut down other systems in the body that use energy. So it will shut down our immune system. It will shut down our digestive system. It will shut down procreation, because we're not going to stop and make a baby at that point in time, right? And so what happens when we're in that state on an ongoing basis, the body stops producing as much progesterone because it's so busy producing cortisol. It's called the progesterone steal. So what happens then is we become estrogen dominant because the body's still producing estrogen. We may still be getting estrogen in through our food, through xenoestrogen toxic sources, and the body's not producing progesterone. And we have this imbalance. We get into the estrogen dominant state, which I've just explained has this downline domino effect on other aspects of our health. So does all of that make sense?
Taking notes now.
Oh, awesome. Love it. So as I said at the very beginning, it is a reminder for everyone to stop accepting our symptoms of hormonal imbalance as something you have to tolerate and choose to do something about it, because it has this downline effect. But when you know what's going on, you can then make changes in your life in order to mitigate that. And that's really empowering. Let's not end up with a disease down the road. Let's fix it now before you ever get a diagnosis, right? I call my podcast Don't Wait for Your Wake Up Call for that exact reason. Prevention and learning and finding out what's going on early is so much better than actually having to deal with a diagnosis and come back from that. So stress, I want to ask you in the chat, because stress is such a huge piece of what I see in terms of people's hormonal imbalances. Where do you feel stress in your body? Just type that in the chat. Chest and throat. Sometimes people feel it in their gut. Might be butterflies. I'm not sure what that little emoji is, Corey, there. Does it feel like everywhere? Or is that the head? Head, okay. Yep, so headaches, etc. So we can be aware of our stress, but we're not always aware of our stress. And sometimes we might be aware of our physical stress, but we're not aware of our mental stress. We're not aware of our emotional stress. And so when I ask people to, rate their stress level on a scale of 1 to 10, they're very often only thinking about their physical stress. And they're not thinking about the rest of it, which means they're underestimating their level of stress because they aren't aware of the rest. And when we underestimate our level of stress, then we may not be taking action to mitigate that stress because we don't realize where we're at, right? And so I just want to share with you what's happening in your body when the body is under stress. And then after that, we're going to just talk about how we can, actions we can take to be mitigating that stress. So I'll go through these pretty quickly. I don't want it to get super sciencey, but if you have any questions about any of these, once I go through the list, then, please chirp up and I can answer them for you. So as I've already mentioned, when the body's under stress, it is increasing cortisol production, which can be associated with weight gain, especially in the belly, or the inability to lose weight or gain muscle, and it is associated with premature aging, and nobody wants that. It also results in decreased nutrient absorption, and this is because, remember, I said digestion gets shut down. So if digestion isn't turned on and we're eating, the body can't fully break down the food that we're eating, and we're not getting the benefit of the nutrients from the food that we're eating. And this is because our digestive system, when it's shut down, isn't producing stomach acid or enzymes to help break down that food, or bile flow from the gallbladder, etc., etc. So with digestion shut down, we're having increased nutrient excretion, meaning it's just going straight through our body and being urinated out. So we're losing important minerals like calcium, magnesium, potassium, zinc, chromium, selenium, etc. And we can also have decreased gut flora populations. So we all know we have bacteria in our gut, and we want to ideally have a healthy balance between good bacteria and bad bacteria. And we have a whole microbiome, a system of microbes in there, and there's more of them than there are of our own human DNA. And they're designed to work symbiotically with us to break down our food so that we can get the energy from that food that we need. But the healthy intestinal bacteria are destroyed by stress. And so then that can lead to immune problems, skin disorders, again, nutrient deficiencies, and digestive distress. Under stress, we have increased salt retention, which can lead to high blood pressure. We have a decrease in our thermic efficiency, which means your ability to burn calories is diminished, hence the weight gain. We have a decrease in thyroid hormone, which I've talked about already, and then that can again lead to weight gain. We can have an increase in blood cholesterol levels. Stress will raise our LDL levels. We can have an increase in our blood platelet aggregation, which is a major risk factor in heart disease. We have a decrease in sex hormones, which results in a lower sex drive. I mean, really, when we're totally stressed out, how's our libido doing? Just ask yourself that question. We have an increase in inflammation, which some people will say is the root cause for health issues. I don't believe it's the root cause because I want to know why we have that inflammation, and stress is one reason. We can have an increase or a decrease in gastric emptying time, meaning The stomach is pushing food through more slowly or more quickly, depending on our digestive system, because stomach acid is not being produced as it should be. And that can then result in either constipation or diarrhea. It can result in bloating, because if it's taking too long to get through the system, it can result in bloating and gas and discomfort in our body. We have an increased swallowing rate. Many people can relate to that if they're nervous about something, for instance. Maybe their throat feels dry and they start swallowing more often. And then we can have an increase in food sensitivities and allergies, as I mentioned earlier. So in other words, stress is impacting your brain, your hair, your muscles, your lungs, your heart, your stomach, your bones, your sex drive, your digestive system, your skin, your immune system, everything. 90% of all doctors' visits are stress related. 60% of all diseases are caused by stress. So what does it feel like? Because I have had some people say to me recently, well, I don't know if I'm stressed. I don't know what that feels like. And possibly because they've been stressed for so long, they don't know what it feels like to not feel stressed, and therefore they don't know what it feels like. But things that you might notice yourself, because you're not necessarily going to notice a lot of that digestive system stuff going on, right? But you might notice dilated pupils, again, the reduced salivation, increased heartbeat, dry eyes, less urination, constipation. And then you also may notice when your body is flooded by epinephrine or cortisol, because it kind of ramps you up, right? Sometimes you can just feel your stress physically rising. And so understanding what stress is doing to your body is so important, because I feel that can motivate us to take action to do something different. If we realize we're stressed out, then we know, okay, I don't want all of those health issues. I don't want the hormonal imbalances, et cetera, et cetera. So what can I now do? And the great news is that we can actually do a lot. And the reality is that building your own business can also be stressful, because everything's on you. And you may be feeling like, but I don't have time in my calendar to add anything else in. And that's where you were at, Kelly, and you shared that story that you were so busy building your business that you weren't making time for you until you realized, wait a minute, in order to build my business, I have to be healthy, so I have to make time for me. So it is a mindset shift in shifting our priorities. So one of the things that I love to teach is something called 5-5-7 breathing. And this is something that we can do absolutely anywhere, because we always carry our breath with us. It's free and it doesn't take very long. So I'm just going to share what this is with you today, and we'll just do a couple of rounds. And I'd love for you to share in the chat how you feel after doing a couple of rounds. Ideally, you do 10 rounds of this. And what I mean by 5-5-7 breathing is we're going to inhale for 5, hold our breath for 5, exhale for 7. And I'll count you through it for 5 rounds so we can experience it. And then I'll explain why it works and why it's so effective. So if you just want to get really comfy, I don't know if Corey and Melissa are driving. You can do this while driving, just don't close your eyes when you're driving. But otherwise, if you're doing this anywhere else, you can close your eyes. So get really comfy. Everybody inhale and exhale, so we're all in the same breath pattern. And now inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 5 rounds. Normally we would do it for 10, but just type in the chat how you feel just from doing that for 5 rounds, which took less than 2 minutes. And 10 rounds will take you less than 5 minutes.
Definitely more relaxed.
Yeah, in just such a short amount of time, right? And we can literally do it anywhere. We can do it at our desk. We can do it in the car if we're stuck in traffic and frustrated. If we're in an office and we're just, feeling stressed out, you can do it at your desk and nobody would notice. But if you felt like you needed to, you could just go to the washroom and sit in a cubicle and do it, right? You can do this in the middle of the night when you're, wake up and you can't get back to sleep because your mind's going a million miles a minute. It's one of my techniques for helping get back to sleep. So why is this so powerful? And that's awesome, Corey, that you already noticed that you're feeling more relaxed. Why is this so powerful? Well, what's happening is that when we're in that stressed out state and our brain's thinking it has to get us to safety, it's expecting us to be running. And if we're running from a lion, we're panting and we're moving our arms and we're breathing hard, right? But because the exhale is longer than the inhale in this exercise, our brain goes, I thought I was stressed out, but I'm breathing like a safe person. I must be safe. And it will then turn on our rest and digest system. And so it's a great way to trick our brain to get out of that sympathetic fight or flight stress mode and into our rest and digest system, where digestion is turned on, where we're going to get a good night's sleep, where our immune system is working at its optimal level for us, et cetera, et cetera. Our hormones are being produced as they should be. Because we were never meant to live in the stress state. We were meant to live in the rest and digest state. And if we were in the stress state, we would get to safety and then the rest and digest state would automatically turn on. But in our world today, we just get hit with one stressor after another that just keeps us stuck in this stress state. And the brain doesn't know the difference between us needing to run from a lion or a tiger and us having a day that starts out with, the alarm doesn't go off and then now we're running late. The kids are fighting you to get out the door. Maybe you have a little spat with your husband because, it's just a stressful morning. And then you get in the car and, oh my God, I don't have enough gas to even get to work. And I got to go to the gas station and I'm already late. And then you hit traffic and you're going to be late for a presentation and blah, 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 blah. It's one thing after another after another. We've all experienced that. And that just keeps us in that chronic stress state. But instead, when we recognize that and we choose to breathe through it, we can switch that state off. Now, it does actually take about 10 rounds for the brain to recognize that we're in that, state of being safe and turn on our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest state, which is why I said do 10 rounds. It takes less than 5 minutes. And the other thing that's happening here that's really powerful is that so often when we're in the stress state, we've got something whirling around in our mind, right? That's causing that stress or making it worse. I don't know about you guys, but me, when I'm doing this technique, I'm counting the 5, 5, 7. So I'm counting all that in my head, but I also have to count 10 rounds. And so I'm using my fingers, right? Because I can't count the 5, 5, 7 and the 10 rounds all in my head. So using my fingers, using my brain, and guess what? All of that focus on all of this counting has made me forget about whatever else was running around in my head causing stress, right? So an amazing technique you can do absolutely anywhere to drop out of that stress state. Any questions about that?
I love that. It's so simple and you're right, like just takes that focus away. But it's interesting because sometimes I do and sometimes I don't feel the need to slow down and breathe, but I certainly notice it in other people because you can actually like see when someone's like shallow breathing, right? Like my husband came home a little flustered the other day and I was like, take a breath. Like you could tell that he needed to actually do that.
Mhm.
Like, use his entire like lungs for breathing and just chill for a minute because he was just like trying to do all the things, you know?
Exactly. And so as we start to practice it, we also create greater awareness, right? And we'll catch it sooner when we need to use it. But a time to use it just to build it into your day that's very effective is right before each meal. Because remember, in the stress state, digestion is turned off.
I love
So
that.
if we just automatically do it before each meal, we're helping turn on digestion before we eat, which is going to improve everybody's gut health, just as a small thing that you can do. But also you're building it into your day 3 times a day so that it starts to create that habit.
Great.
So I want to talk about self-care because that is a piece of self-care. Bringing us out of that stress state is so important. And that's, to me, the quickest way to do it. But what can we be doing on an ongoing basis to help us stay out of that state as much as possible? Now, back when I was in the corporate world, which is 7+ years ago now, I didn't know what I know today. And when I went to health coaching school, one of the first things I learned had such a profound difference in my life. And that was that self-care is not selfish. I totally thought it was. I was a mom. I had 2 young children. I thought I had to look after everybody else first, look after people at work first, everybody else first. And if I looked after me first, it was selfish. What I learned was that I can't serve from an empty cup. I am no use to all the other people in my life if I am trying to serve from an empty cup, right? Because when I'm serving from that empty cup in that stressed out state, I'm short-tempered, I've got low energy levels, I'm, frustrated, quick to yell, blah, blah, blah. If I look after me first and my cup is overflowing, I have so much more to give. And so I made myself a little mantra, which is self-care is the most selfless act because it allows you to show up and give the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. So I saw a couple different quotes and I merged them together into that because it was really meaningful to me. And to this day, when I say it, I get full body goosebumps because it is so true. I want to show up and give the world the best of me, not just what's left of me. And so I had to change the way I was doing things in my life. I started calendaring my time for me. I didn't plan to do it last and it never get to it. I started making it first. For me, it's generally first thing in the morning. For all of us, the activities that we do as our self-care are going to be different. It is whatever brings you joy. For me, I am at 58 days out on my paddleboard this season because my paddleboarding time, for the most part, unless it's super windy, is Zen time. I just get to go out, be on the lake, enjoy the scenery, enjoy the calm, paddle around, no one else is around me, and just be. And it's when I get to go inside. And it's super meaningful to me. So I make it a priority. I put it in my calendar. I know I'm going to paddleboard. So it's not that I get to that time where I've created the time and then I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So I get on Facebook and start scrolling and waste the time. That is not self-care. Definitely not. There is a direct correlation, in fact, between the amount of time we spend on social media and depression. So it is definitely not self-care. Get off the social media and do something else that brings you joy. In winter, I downhill ski, I cross-country ski. Other things I do in summer is getting out into nature, walking in nature, backcountry, camping and hiking, because nature is incredibly powerful at dropping us out of our sympathetic state when we give it the chance to do so. So just getting out into nature is incredibly helpful. But there's meditation, and maybe you're like, I'm not someone to meditate. Try meditating with guided meditations. I get that you might not want to go from not ever meditating to then sitting in silence for 30 minutes and finding that impossible and thinking that you have to stop all thoughts. That's not meditation. Start slowly Start with guided meditation. Acknowledge that you're still going to have thoughts through your meditation, and that's okay. And when you become aware of the fact, oh, my mind's wandered, you can just gently bring your mind back to the guided meditation. No judgment, no beating yourself up. It's totally normal for your mind to wander. But when you just bring it back, focus in again, as you do it more and more, you get better at it. And again, like the breathing, you will find that it's incredibly calming. What else can you be doing? Reaching out and connecting with another human. We've had so much disconnect for the last 2 years. Getting back and connecting with people is really powerful. We are supposed to be connected beings. We are supposed to live in community. Other things, reading a book if you enjoy reading, having a bath, adding Epsom bath salts because there's good magnesium in those Epsom bath salts that will draw out toxins and help the body calm. Maybe it's journaling for you. Maybe it's just sitting on a rock with your face turned up towards the sun with your eyes closed because, again, you're in nature. And when you do that, you'll notice the brown kind of coloring behind your eyes. That too is helping drop you into your sympathetic nervous system. So what I would love to do, and again, I don't know if Corey and Melissa, if you're driving or not, hopefully you're not, but what I had wanted to do was to ask everybody to find 15 minutes per day for the next week in your calendar, where you can physically right now put time in your calendar to do something. And don't just block the 15 minutes and say self-care. What are you going to do in that 15 minutes? Because I want you to walk away from this workshop with at least the start of a plan of you taking care of you and you prioritizing it. And so put the reminders in too, so that it pops up. This is my time to do what? And it doesn't matter what time of day it is, morning, middle of the day, evening, what's going to work for you to get you started really prioritizing your self-care time. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do that. And then I would love to share what you've done, noticed, thought of, what you want to set up for yourself.
Getting interesting because next week I'm traveling. So that's an easy one for it to be like, oh, I'm traveling. I can't do anything.
Yeah, but we can still do it while we travel. So are you traveling by car, by plane? How are you traveling?
Yeah, I'm flying. I'm going to Minneapolis for 4 days. So I'm at an event for 2 days, so I have to
Right.
figure out how to do stuff in between there.
Right. So traveling can be stressful, especially in today's world, right? So how do we, mitigate that stress? Can you do some 5-5-7 breathing on the plane? Can you do it in the airport? Even if you're standing in line at security because it's a really long line and, oh my goodness, am I even going to get to my gate on time? Right? So just knowing that you can do your 5-5-7 breathing anywhere and everywhere is awesome. And then looking at your schedule ahead of time. Can you, is doing a workout self-care for you? Is getting up and just going for a walk, getting outside early in the morning, especially if you're going to be inside all day long, or getting out and going for a walk at lunchtime. What can you build in there? And it doesn't have to be long. It literally can be 15 minutes can make a huge difference. So planning ahead so that you know you can make that work is really, really helpful. And okay, we may not achieve it 100% of the time, but guess what? What if we achieve it 80% of the time? That's way ahead of where we might be at right now. So hopefully you got some built in there, Kelly. And Corey dropped off, unfortunately. I guess she could only be here for the first hour. Melissa's here, but hasn't been chatting in the chat, so I'm not sure she's able to. But I do encourage anyone seeing this recording to take the time to put something in your calendar, because that was the game changer for me. Initially, I just thought, okay, I have to do more for myself. And then it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. But when I started putting it in my calendar, then it started happening. And that's when I noticed the profound difference. And what I really noticed was, at the time I had teenage daughters, they're adults now, but what I noticed was they were still pushing my buttons as teenage daughters or sons will do, but I wasn't reacting, right? The way I was responding was from a much calmer state where I could ask questions. And, instead of just yelling at them to stop whatever they're doing, et cetera, we could actually have a conversation around it, make it a learning experience, because I was responding instead of reacting. And it took me a while to notice that. And I kind of went, wow, that's really cool, because I'm enjoying this so much more. Then did I like going around yelling all the time? No, that's not how I wanted to treat my loved ones. And yet it's what was happening, right? And so when I calendarized it and the self-care got done, I was living in a calmer state and I could be calmer with my family. So that leads me into boundary setting. And that is something that I'm still working on. We all can be better at. And there's always, somewhere in our life where we might be needing to set a boundary. And so some examples of those are, when you're feeling taken advantage of, and this can be at work, at home, with friends, etc., any aspect of your life. Just stop and think for a minute. Are you feeling taken advantage of anywhere? Are you feeling drained of energy? Is there anywhere there's drama in your life? Or if you're feeling anger or resentment towards someone or some experience, it often means you've broken your own boundaries. And I want to share with you a really effective way to set boundaries. So it's a 3-step process that you can take away from this and start practicing. So first of all, what invariably happens is somebody is asking us to do something. That's step 1. They're asking for our time, our money, or our energy. And so that's an external. Someone else is coming to us and asking for something. And often we feel we have to respond right away. But I invite you not to. I invite you to say, thanks for asking. I'll get back to you. It just gives you that little bit of space, right? And then step 2 is for you to go internal and ask 3 questions of yourself. Do I have it to give? Do I want to give it? And under what conditions? And then step 3 is, having gone through that process with yourself, to then reply to the person with a yes or a no. And if saying yes, provide any conditions. And if saying no, I want you to know that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to justify your answer. And sometimes consequences are needed. And it may not be the first time you set a boundary with someone, but if they don't honor that boundary that you've created, then the next time there's going to need to be consequences. And if they're an adult, you have them set their own consequence, because often they'll make it actually tougher than what you were thinking of doing anyway. But they're an adult, so you have them set their own. If it's a child, you might set it for them, with them. And a way to a really nice way, or an agreement frame, I call it, to create a boundary is to use the phrase, I love and appreciate X, and I need Y. Now we use and, they're not but. because a but will cancel out the first part of that sentence. So I just want to give you an example. For instance, my kids are young adults. They come home from university, and when they're here, they're working and they want to use my car. So do I have the time, money, energy, right? I'm asking myself that. Am I okay with having them use my car? Well, I work from home. So if I'm not using my car, I'm fine with them using the car. If I'm going paddleboarding, then I want my car, right? So as I set the boundary, do I have it to give? Am I going paddleboarding? Yes. No, you can't have my car. I'm not going paddleboarding, or I've already been paddleboarding. You can have the car for the rest of the day. So do I want to give it to them? Well, yes, because I've agreed with my kids that for now, they don't need to buy a car to have extra cars in the driveway, etc. So that's our agreement, that they can have the car when I have it to give, right? And then under what conditions? I want that car to come back clean. I don't want your garbage in the car. I don't want your friend's garbage in the car. If it's low on gas, I want it to come back filled up with gas. So don't have the gas fuel light on. So the next time I get in the car, now I have to fill up with gas, right? These are all things that have happened. So I've learned from these things, right? And realized I had to set boundaries. And so I could say that I love and appreciate that you have 3 jobs and you need to move between your jobs in the middle of the day. And it's helpful to have a car to do that, and that you're working hard and being a contributing member of society. And I need my car to come back with gas in it and clean and tidy. And what's the consequence? They set the consequence. They're adults. And they know that doesn't happen. The consequence they set is they don't get the car and they got to ride the bus. And it works. But I had to set that boundary with them, because of course, if I don't set that boundary, they'll do whatever they want. And I would find garbage all through the car. I would get in the car and the gas light would be on, right? And it was pissing me off. So I had to set the boundary. We all have boundaries like that we can set in our lives. Maybe it's babysitting grandchildren. Maybe it's babysitting nieces or nephews, and setting the boundaries around the time the parents will be home, because you might have a busy day the next day and have to get up, and you don't want to be getting into bed at 1 a.m., etc. We don't have to do everything that's asked of us. And when we set boundaries, we can, again, we're caring for ourselves. We're creating a little Zen bubble for ourselves. We're putting the ball in our court. And we just need to give ourselves that little bit of space. Thanks for asking. Let me get back to you.
So that's interesting. Sometimes I feel the need to set a boundary for something that I haven't even been asked for, because I just assume, or I feel like a natural, like I'm going to have to volunteer for this, or I'm going to have to participate in that, or be engaged in this other thing. And I don't actually have to, like my kids' hockey team. I don't have to actually do any of that stuff, but I feel bad, but nobody actually asked me.
Right. Because you set the boundary first.
Right. Because I need to set a boundary first, because I know I'd be triggered otherwise.
Right. And so if we know that, and we can do that in advance because we know what our life is like, there is somewhere that you're volunteering or providing service in your life, because we all naturally want to do that, but we can't do it all. And what I saw through my experience when my kids were little and I didn't know any of this, I was volunteering for everything for them because other people weren't stepping up. So then what? I'm going to burn out because other people aren't stepping up. And so instead, I had to learn it's okay to say no. And it's really interesting. That can be hard. The first time I said no to someone, the look on their face was aghast, because I'd never been known to say no. And they're like, what do you mean you're saying no to me? I came to you first because you're always the one that says yes. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm learning to say no. Mm-hmm. And no is no. And in my head, my brain is going, just say yes, because you could do this in a heartbeat, and you could do it with your eyes closed and your hands tied behind your back. And I'm arguing back in my head silently, no, I'm learning to say no. And this is a really good way to practice. I'm going to say no, and I'm going to stick to my guns, and I'm going to say no. It was organizing the next high school career day. And I said no. and I didn't do it. And guess what? That person's never asked me again to volunteer for anything. So I get to choose what I volunteer for, and I don't get pulled into everything because I learned to say no. And even though my brain gave me a hard time about it, I stuck to my guns. And so the next time I said no, I didn't get a hard time from my brain because my brain knew what it was like for me to say no, right? So when we change our patterns, we have to really stick to our guns because our brain will notice the difference and it might kind of argue back with us like what happened to me. But it's important that we do this for ourselves as part of our self-care. I needed more time in my calendar for me. So in order to get that, I had to start saying no and stop looking after everybody else first. So I know we just have about 15 minutes left. I just want to quickly talk about sleep because sleep is another very important factor in our health. And it's impacting our gut health, it's impacting our stress resiliency. And so often it's the thing that we squeeze out of our day. You know, we get busy, and I'll just do one more thing, and then we're getting to bed later and later. And I encourage people to instead plan their day around their sleep. We all need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night to function at our best. And if you're getting sick, it's going to be more along the tune of 9 hours. If you're feeling great, maybe it's closer to 7 hours. But we need that as human beings to function at our best. And with less than 7 hours of sleep, objective impairments can be measured. And here's something super interesting too. Every waking moment, we are undergoing very mild brain damage. And then the brain repairs itself while it's asleep. I don't know about you, but I want my brain to be repairing that brain damage every night. And so I want to get the amount of sleep that is needed for our brain to do this. But also the brain and body detox while we sleep. And we've spent a lot of time earlier talking about toxins and the need to detox. So let's let our body do what it's naturally designed to do. And if we get enough sleep, it can do that. Another point to note is if we're eating dinner too close to bedtime and digestion hasn't finished when we go to bed. So if we eat dinner and go to bed, because that's the schedule that we've created for ourselves, we're in digestion mode, which means the body can't go into detox mode because digestion trumps everything. So ideally, you want to eat dinner 2 to 3 hours before bed, so digestion is completed by the time you lie down to go to sleep, so that you can then get into a deep restorative sleep. Now, the other thing that's really important to know, and I'm going to share my screen again, is that cortisol and melatonin are inverse hormones. So we've talked about cortisol and what's happening in the stress state. Now, the body does produce cortisol every single day. It's highest in the morning. We're waking up, we need energy for our day, and cortisol is helping provide that. And we want it. And it is naturally lowest at night because now we're getting into sleep mode. And when cortisol is at its lowest, that allows melatonin to be at its highest, which is what we need for that deep restorative sleep. But if our body isn't calming because we're in that chronic stress state in the evening, then the body's not producing enough melatonin. We can't get into a deep restorative sleep. 70 million North Americans struggle with sleep. A huge piece of that is stress. Another factor of that is the screens that we're looking at all day long, every day, which were not an issue 50 years ago, but are very much an issue today because our screens are emitting blue light. Blue light is the light that we get into our eyes at high noon. So blue light coming into our eyes from our screen in the evening are simply telling our brain that it's high noon. It doesn't need to start producing melatonin to get ready for sleep because it's the middle of the day. That's what the brain knows. So what we have to do is counter that. And we can do that quite easily on our devices. So if you have an iPhone, iPad, etc., you can go into settings and go into display and brightness, and you can turn on night shift. And it will automatically put a yellow light on your screen from, say, right now for me, it's 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. so that I'm not getting the blue light into my eyes, because blue light actually blocks the production of melatonin. For every hour you're on a screen, when you get off, your melatonin production is blocked for 30 minutes per hour you were on the screen. So if you're on the screen for 3 hours between maybe watching an hour and a half of TV, maybe you were on your computer for an hour, and maybe you're on your phone for half an hour, let's face it, we can easily spend 3 hours on our screens at night. That means when you get off, melatonin won't even start being produced for another 90 minutes, an hour and a half. And yet we might turn off the TV, brush our teeth, fall into bed and expect to sleep on demand. And we're not. We're having trouble sleeping because the body hasn't produced melatonin to help us get into a deep restorative sleep. On a computer, you can download something called Just Get Flux. It's free software. It's got GPS coordinates in it. So when you travel, when you go to Minnesota next week, Kelly, it'll recognize you're in a different time zone. It'll ask you if it wants you to switch it over, and it will automatically turn on a yellow light at dusk. And then for television, maybe the new televisions have some kind of blue blocking in them, but I haven't bought a television for over 10 years. So I wear my blue light blocking glasses. And I test this. I've tested it recently on, my husband and I were just watching Stranger Things and finishing up that series. And I didn't wear my blue blocking glasses one night. I tossed and turned and could not get to sleep for ages after that. All the other nights I used my blue blocking glasses, fell asleep, no problem. It's powerful and they're not expensive to buy. And so use them. My only word of caution with yellow light on computers and devices is you do not want to go online clothes shopping when its yellow light is turned on, because it distorts the color of the clothing to what you're used to. And what arrives in the mail may not be what you were expecting. So don't go online clothes shopping in the evening. So as you can see from this little chart, the ideal time for humans to be going to bed is between 10 and 11 p.m. because that's when cortisol is at its lowest and our melatonin is at its highest. And that's when we can get into our deep restorative sleeps. And then we want to be waking up between 6 and 8 a.m. because that's when cortisol is at its highest and we're going to have good energy for the day. And yet I work with many people who tell me, oh, but I can't fall asleep until 2 a.m. And so then I sleep until 11 a.m. Well, if they're going past that 10 to 11 window, they're very often getting what we call a second wind. And that's because our cortisol is starting to rise and give us that energy that we think is the second wind. But then we're sleeping till 11 a.m., we're going to wake up feeling groggy because cortisol is already dropping by then, right? And so we wake up and we don't have the same energy as if we actually wake up earlier. So we are natural creatures designed to work with the natural rhythm of the natural world, and we need to stop fighting it and instead to understand it so that we can work with it in order to optimize our sleep. Because when we optimize our sleep, we're optimizing our ability to handle the stresses that are thrown at us every day. We're optimizing our gut health, and we're balancing our hormones and reducing the cortisol flood on the body. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about that before I just finish up?
Do you test cortisol and melatonin hormones, or is it always fluctuating too much that you can't really?
So great question. And that leads me into the next slide. So yes, we test cortisol, and just understanding the cortisol pattern helps us kind of know what's happening with melatonin because they're inverse markers, right? So this is the lab that I talked about what I did in order to assess my hormones way back when that I now offer to my clients. And it's a very powerful lab because we get so much information in one lab. So it shows us all 4 sex hormones so we can see what's happening with our estrogen and progesterone levels. It shows testosterone and DHEA. It also shows all 4 cortisol markers. So first thing in the morning, right before lunch, right before dinner, and then at bedtime. So we can see if our cortisol pattern is moving in that normal diurnal rhythm, or is it kind of moving up and down, up and down. Sometimes I see people with low cortisol in the morning and high in the evening. That's backwards, right? When we know that, we can use some natural herbs to help calm the body while we start to change some lifestyle habits, implementing self-care and other techniques to be lowering our stress and rebalancing our stress. The idea isn't to be using herbs to calm the body forever. It's to help the body do that while we make some habit change. It also shows our vitamin D levels. It shows our insulin markers. It shows all 4 thyroid markers. Remember I said estrogen dominance can slow the thyroid. So we want to see that. We want to get those early warning signs of where is the thyroid at, so we can support the thyroid in coming back into optimal function. The insulin markers are important because I said estrogen dominance can lead us down the path of type 2 diabetes. So let's get those early warning signs too, right? And then vitamin D is just so important for our overall health, for our immune system, et cetera, et cetera. And when our vitamin D levels are optimal, it helps all of everything else be optimal as well. In fact, some people are trying to call vitamin D a hormone because it's just that important, right? So this is a very powerful lab. And as I said, it can get mailed to your home, and you run the lab, it's saliva test and a blood spot. So you get little lancets to prick your finger and drip blood onto the spots on the card, mail it off to the lab, and then I get the results and review them with you. And I don't just review them with you and say, here, do this, now you're on your own. What I saw in the market is people need a little bit more support on their health journey. They need a little bit more education. They have questions along the way that they want to get answers to. It's really hard to do that in the medical model that we have today. But that's the support that I give because I want people to be successful. And so I have packages where you work with me, I work with you over time as we rebalance the body and bring you back to optimal health. Why is this not advancing here now? There we go. If people have concerns about the state of their gut health based on high stress, poor sleep, etc., that's also a lab that we can run that will show us bacterial and yeast imbalances, neurotransmitter function because of the gut-brain connection. When our gut isn't happy, it may not be producing serotonin and dopamine properly. There are feel-good hormones. So if they're not being produced because our gut's out of balance, let's look at that. How many people are going to the doctor these days and saying, I don't feel great, I'm sad all the time, or whatever it is, and they're just being prescribed an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication? I invite people to first look at the health of their gut, because when we rebalance the gut and the body can do what it's supposed to do, those neurotransmitters can be produced and we can feel happy again without destroying our gut because of the medication that we're on. And this is a urine sample, so super easy to do at home. It also shows mitochondrial function, which are your energy powerhouses. So if you feel like you're dragging your butt, you're wanting to know why, this could be part of it. And it shows your detox pathways. And then this metals and minerals test is also really helpful. Oh, and the last one shows vitamin levels. And this one is showing mineral levels. So important because under stress, we are burning through them, using them up, and then not necessarily able to replenish them again because we have nutrient depleted soil systems. So understanding our deficiencies helps us get really specific for you, your body, your health, and replenish what your body needs. And this one also shows 5 key metal toxicities: aluminum, cadmium, arsenic, lead, and mercury. Very commonly found inside our bodies, and our body has a really hard time detoxing these because they're not natural. The body doesn't know what to do with it. They get stored in our fat closets, and we don't want that. So I just wanted to share all of these with you. This is a hair clipping, so it's super easy. You take some hair samples from the back of your neck, mail it into the lab, we get the results. So super easy to do these labs. And I just want you to know they're available because, as I said, my doctor never told me. I had to go searching, and save you the searching, you get to know now. So just to wrap up very quickly, if you'd like to know your toxic load score, I have a quiz you can take. The link is there. And it's 105 questions, but it's very quick to fill out, just asking you symptoms. Are you experiencing this, 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 this? And so the answers are the same for most of the questions. As it creates awareness for you around symptoms that you might have been experiencing and ignoring. Remember, I asked you, start paying attention to your symptoms. It's a clue. It's your body asking you to do something differently. If your score is high, don't worry about it. It can be mild, moderate, severe, extreme. I see a lot of severe and extreme, and that is not a surprise in today's world. The great thing is you're here, you're looking into this, you're discovering your toxic load, you understand how that's impacting your health down the line, and you can choose to do something about it. And I guide people through programs to help detox. And again, I make it as easy as possible, setting you up for success, providing recipes, holding your hand, because I know that doesn't sound like fun. But if your body needs it, it's well worth it. And every single person I've ever guided through in 3 weeks has started feeling so much better again. I had a lady say to me when she woke up on Monday morning after just completing her 3-week detox, she lay in bed realizing, I don't remember the last time I felt this good. And that's powerful, right? In 3 weeks, that's all it takes. And then after you do your toxic load quiz, just book your one-to-one health strategy call with me, because maybe you've got things going on. Maybe you've got questions. What can you do? I'm happy to share that with you. It's a complimentary call, and just have that conversation to point you in the right direction. Whether you work with me or not, I guarantee you will get some tips that you can start implementing to help you on your health journey, because that's what I'm all about. I just want to create a thriving global community and let people know there is another way, and we don't have to live with chronic illness. It is not a life sentence. We can come back from chronic illness, but better yet, let's not ever get the chronic illness in the first place. So there you go. That's what I wanted to share with everyone. And hopefully that was super helpful.
Totally is. My kid's just on her way home from school, so she's walkie-talking me while you're talking. So sorry to miss the very, very last moment. Just give me 1 second.
No problem. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop those 2 links into the chat for everyone. And drop that here so people can click on it and get access to those links. And thank you, Melissa, for your comment. You haven't had a chance to get into the chat much, but priceless information. And it is absolutely my pleasure to share it with you. Thank you for joining and staying on and making it a part of your day.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you for putting those links in there. I was just trying to find them in your form, so that was much easier. And please do take Melissa up on her offer to chat with you, because everybody's health journey is so personalized, and it's so helpful to have that individual perspective. And I know I took so many notes from this, starting to think about different things that may be affecting me, and just taking the time again to stop and think about this for 90 minutes today is definitely something to be proud of, because it is your self-care. It is a self-care moment to take time to think about it and to feel proud that you did. So I'm really glad that you could be with us today and joining and either watching the replay or hearing this on some other platform that may be coming in the future. I just wanted to give a quick plug for anybody who is in the Cochrane area. We are actually having a live event on October 19th because it is Small Business Week. So we'll be doing 2 workshops. One of them is, both are options to be in person, and the afternoon session, our next call for Entrepreneur School, will be with Janice Porter, who you know, Melissa, who is a LinkedIn trainer. So she's going to talk to us all about LinkedIn, and I'm doing a workshop on marketing and creating your next 90-day marketing plan. So watch for information coming out about that. I'm really excited to be hosting those events. And thank you so much for coming today.
It's my pleasure. I'm just going to finish with one stat that might help motivate people to get started today. And that is the fact that a lot of people don't address their health because they think it's too expensive. And the reality is that in North America right now, the average person is spending 10 years in a nursing home, slowly dying. That is not quality of life, and that is super, super expensive. And I want to help you avoid the 10 years in the nursing home and get those 10 years back. In order to do that, we have to start taking care of our health now and invest in it the way we invest in our car, in our home, in our greatest assets.
So thank you.